Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Roger Hughes, the newly inaugurated president of Doane University. Dr. Hughes' path to the presidency of Doane is unique. He was the former head football coach at Stenson University and at Princeton University, and other than earning his PhD at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, he has no higher ed administrator experience. Dr. Hughes is not the first head football coach to be named a university president. That distinction goes to Jim Tressel, current president at Youngstown State University and former head football coach at The Ohio State University, where he won the national championship. What makes Dr. Hughes special and the right person at the right time for Doane are his leadership abilities, his ability to connect with people, and his tenacity at growing and learning. He's a true student of the art and science of leadership, not just book learning, but by putting what he learns into practice. And today we're fortunate enough to hear from someone who I think will be an exemplar of leadership in higher education going forward. Roger, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. Yours is a very unique path to a presidency. In fact, I think there's only one other person who is a university president who was a former head football coach. Tell us a little bit about your background so that we can understand how you prepared yourself for the big chair.
Well, I'm the president at my alma mater. And so one of the things that I'm sure that I had an inside track on becoming the president at a place like this because people knew who I was and they'd kind of seen my track record. And I knew things about Doane, some of the traditions, the way Doane does things. And I think obviously it would probably much easier for me to speak to those things during the interview process because I had a sense of what that was like. The other part was I was been very, very lucky to be affiliated with some very stellar institutions. You know, during my coaching career, I was at Dartmouth. I was the head coach at Princeton. I was the head coach at Stetson. And those were some of the things that just being around a really great high academic school, I think I had the priorities right, that it's all about the student athlete and they have to get a degree first. Now, they're not looking for careers in the NFL. If some make it, that's great. But that's certainly not their focus. They're there to get a degree and then hopefully get a jump start on a career. And then I think the other thing that happened, what was really unique, I actually interviewed for this job 10 years ago. And during my preparation, I learned a lot about what colleges operate. To be honest, I never thought of colleges as a business. I always kind of thought of them as a very noble profession. And I never got into the nuts and bolts of the numbers and how you actually do things. And so that was a great learning process 10 years ago. And then in the meantime, I was asked by Stetson University in DeLand, Florida, to start a Division I football program from scratch. And because in that process, you have to, with 120 football players coming in, you've got to talk with every aspect of the university: housing, the cafeteria, obviously student support, recruiting, financial aid. We had to work with the faculty to make sure that programs were offered that were going to attract very high academic males, such as engineering and things like that. So my experience through that process over those 10 years and building that program up into a conference contender really actually made me a much better candidate this time around than I was the last time around. And I must have left a bit of an impression the first time because during the process when Dr. Carter had decided he was going to retire, the Board of Trustees reached out to me and asked if I would still be interested. And they were concerned that I may have some bitter feelings since I wasn't chosen the first time. And listen, I've been in coaching enough. You know, it's crazy how and why some guys get jobs, and sometimes the things the qualities you're looking for in a candidate are different depending on where you're at within the lifestyle of the institution. And it so happened that right now they were looking for someone with some of my skill sets, and I'm lucky enough to be here.
Well, that's great. And your biggest skill set from my conversation is your ability to relate to people, your leadership. Mm-hmm. And now higher ed has some challenges in building good leaders. We talked a little bit about this yesterday.
I think you're correct. And one of the things that happened during my tenure at Stetson, I started the program from scratch. I had all freshmen. And I made a mistake. I underestimated the power of an upper class. The upperclassmen, when you're with students, you're only with them probably 4 to 5 hours a day, but they're with their colleagues or their roommates or their teammates many more hours a day. And so what I realized was I just expected the leadership qualities to just grow in them as they developed, chronologically in their age. And what I found after the year 3, the captains we had elected were not being followed, nor were they being good leaders. And at that point in time, I talked with our women's basketball coach, Lynn Bria. When she didn't have a standout leader among her team, she had them apply for the job. And I thought, what a great idea. So I started that. And coincidentally, I happened to pick up a book called Extreme Ownership, How Navy SEALs Lead and Win. And as I read the book, it became very apparent it was exactly what I was looking for from the leadership of the team. And what, as you know, in any organization, if the leader is the one instituting everything, the organization is not going to reach its full potential. When a team is team-driven, not coach-driven, you're going to have a chance for them to make the right decision when the coaches aren't around. And so this Extreme Ownership book, I read it, and I started a new program to develop captains. They had to apply for the job. They had to do a resume, 2 letters of rec. They had to go out and talk to a community leader and ask them what it is like to be a leader, what makes a great leader. And then I taught a leadership course to the team. Anyone on the team could be in it. Usually about half the team joined up, but you had to be in that course if you wanted to be the captain. And then based on the interview, we did kind of a military interview where I had outside people like a lieutenant colonel, I had an administrator, I had our strength coach. We all sat on the board and kind of asked them questions. Why do you want to be a captain? Have you thought about this situation? So we took them through that area that they're going to face as they become leaders. And out of that, not only was I able to find captains, but I was able to find underclassmen who had those leadership qualities that we could kind of groom our next leader as we go forward. Then I had those people who were in the class teach the whole team that book concept when the team came back in the fall. So I was able to send my leadership message twice a year back to the leadership of the team, and I could indoctrinate all the freshmen and the newcomers to the team, because you lose about a quarter of your team every year in that first 3 weeks of the season. And it totally changed the culture of our team. It totally made them take accountability for where the team was going and what the team was about. It was absolutely the best decision that I ever made. And I would like to say I came up with it, but I just kind of dumbed into it one day. And then I've actually taken that approach here with my leadership team. I don't call them a cabinet anymore. They're the leadership team. No one's ever been managed out of a crisis. They've been led out of a crisis. And so I wanted people on campus to understand we're leading, we're not managing. And we can talk about that later, the differences, in my opinion. And I'm also, the deans are going through it as well with the provost right now here. So I think everyone can improve their leadership skills. And I just think given the gift of leadership to any employee or any student is the absolute best gift that you can give them for going forward to help them make whatever decision they have to in later life.
Most definitely. I would say that academics can be some of the best leaders and some of the worst leaders out there, because we learn through example. You're a scholar of leadership. You have read far and wide on leadership. And with that, you give people the abilities, you give them the tools. It's like that old thing. You want to teach a village how to fish.
Yeah.
You want to feed them, teach them how to fish. Don't give them the fish.
Right.
And in the Navy, we used to say, you never learned how to fly until you actually taught somebody else how to. And that's what you've done.
Well, that's certainly what I'm trying to do, because my job is to make sure that I help everyone around me get to their goals. The way Simon Sinek puts it in his book, The Ultimate Game, he talks about leaders are responsible for the results, but they don't get all the results. But leaders are responsible to take care of the people who get the results. And so my way of taking care of our employees and people on the leadership team is to help them become the best leader they can, so that if they want that opportunity to lead, they can do that at a higher level, or they become better leaders of each team that's within the university. And I think a lot of times our society right now, with this NLI and transfer portal, it's all about me. What can I get mine? If we talked about being better teammates a lot of times, and we started thinking about things from a team setting, I just think we're going to be better off as we go forward.
I fully agree. It's a holistic perspective on what's going on. You're only as good as the weakest link in your chain.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. And on the football, to illustrate or amplify a point that you made, you're on the sidelines. You're not out on the field. The folks out there have to be well-trained. They have to be able to recognize situations, and they have to be able to react to particular situations. And a lot of times there'll be something out there that they haven't seen, and that's where they have to dig down into their experience and their gut and say, this is what I think's happening.
Well, 100%. As Jocko Willink puts in the book, he said, it's leader's job to state the intent and the plan, the mission, so to speak. It's the team's job that if they don't understand what the leader's intent is, they have to ask questions to make sure they're both on the same page. So just to your point, one of the things that I was asked during the interview process was, what do you want your legacy to be? Which is a pretty tough question when you haven't been a president for one day in your life. And here's how I answered the question. I said, well, the first thing I want to do is leave Doane better than I found it. That's what I've done at every place that I've been. I always want to make it better than what I found it. And then the second thing I said, if I'm really doing my job well, if I've really been a great leader, no one will miss me when I'm gone, because I will have instilled the things that others need so that if I step out of the room or leave the country or step off the job, the organization continues to function going forward. So really the best leaders are the ones that aren't missed when they're gone because they've done such a great job with the organization can continue going forward.
One of the things that I have always preached when it comes to leadership is one of the first things a new leader needs to do is figure out who their replacement is and get him or her trained.
That's a great point. And I think that actually sums up better than what I was trying to say about helping the leaders on my leadership team become better leaders to get where they want to go. And I'm going to actually plagiarize that, just so you know. I'm not giving you credit for that statement.
Please do.
Yeah.
If I had to give credit for all the statements I've heard, I'd be saying, well, Roger Hughes told me about this, and Roger, said this. So yeah, help yourself.
Thank you.
And so you studied leadership tremendously. You are a scholar of leadership, like I said earlier. Mm-hmm. You made a comment yesterday that leadership is leadership regardless of where you are. Now, coming into the position, what did you do besides your reading to get you ready for your interviews and to be the leader that you are? What was your leadership development track?
Well, first of all, being here at Doane, our coaches were fabulous leaders. We had a guy named Tom Hood, who was our defensive coordinator, Brian Neighbor, who went on to win a national championship at Cameron University in football. I was a GA for Coach Osborne at the University of Nebraska and really didn't appreciate what a great leader he was until I actually became a head coach. Everyone thinks Coach Osborne was very mild-mannered. He was one of the most competitive people you'll ever meet. Mm-hmm. And his expectation for excellence, his standard of performance that he had for everyone in the organization was just accepted. And that's why the walk-on program was so great at Nebraska, because these kids from Nebraska would have crawled through 400 miles of broken glass just to get a chance to put a Husker uniform on. And he leveraged that want and that sense of pride in that football team so that the kids from Nebraska taught what I call the mercenaries, the kids from New Jersey, Florida, Texas, hey, this is our team. This is how it's going to go. And you talk about a team-led organization, that's exactly what that was. And then, going forward, I did my study, but I always tried to look at some of the best military leaders. For example, Napoleon. One of the things he talked about communications, he always had a corporal that was next to him all the time. And he would give the corporal his orders, and then he'd make the corporal say it back to him. And if the corporal did not state it back correctly, then he knew that he had not given the right message, and he modified his message till the corporal could tell. Then he sent the message out so that everybody knew what he was going to do. Little things like that. I try to go to as many leadership speakers that I can. John Gordon's a great author, John Maxwell. And I also, my faith is pretty strong as well. And so I think that's part of it as well. And if you go back to, if you're a Christian and you believe in Jesus, some of the servant leadership that he had taught us how to do it was absolutely right there. So I never miss an opportunity to pick up one nugget here or one nugget here. And through that, I've been very lucky to have some great coaches and great examples that I can utilize as I try to lead this organization.
Well, here's a funny story for you. My introduction to Tom Osborne happened at the Oklahoma-Nebraska game when Johnny Rodgers ran the punt back for the touchdown.
1971. I was watching that game on TV. It was one of the most unbelievably athletic plays I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I was listening to it on the radio because I was living in Panama at the time, and we didn't have it on television.
So, that was a great game. That's one of the things, obviously, when Nebraska went to Big Ten, that we lost that rivalry, but that may come back now. But Yeah, it was just, and again, there were times as a graduate assistant, I questioned, why did Coach Osborne make this? Coach Osborne was always a believer in second chances. And if the young man told him this is the way it was, he believed that young man. And there are times when I go, there's no way, you should just get rid of him. But when I sat in the chair, I realized getting rid of the young man was the easiest thing to do. The best thing to do was find that, there were teachable moments, there were second chances. And sometimes in our society right now, there are no teachable moments. I can remember being in a small town, I did some very stupid things, and thank goodness people in the village took me under their wing and said, don't do something stupid like this. And it didn't hurt my career, it didn't go on my record, so to speak. And so that's one of the things I learned from Coach Osborne was, everybody deserves a second chance. And he was so honest, so sincere. Just, again, some of the things that I learned from him, I was very lucky to be under his tutelage.
And I can see that very much so. We're getting into those qualities to be a great leader, and obviously believing in your people, trusting your people, building the trust, communications. There's another one that we talked about a little bit is decision making. You've had to change around a little bit of your decision making, since stepping into the president. You learned a lot, but your decisions you make are not done every 25 seconds.
Well, and that's one of the things, as I prepared for the interview, I reached out to 8 either sitting or retired college presidents. And one of them was Jim Tressel, who is from Youngstown State, who was a former football coach. And one of the things he shared with me, he said, you're used to making that decision all the time. There's a pace that higher education moves. And you have to understand and accept that pace. And one of the best things that I thought I read was, while we've got to be cognizant of the business side of the organization and be able to move at the speed of business, when Beethoven wrote his Ninth Symphony in the 1800s, it took so long to play. And guess what? When an orchestra plays it today, it takes that same amount of time. And so in higher education, there are just some things that need that process that they have to go through. And I'm not saying I like it, but I'm learning to deal with it and plan ahead for that. And going back to the decision making, I was asked about that, and another reporter asked. I said, I am used to making these decisions all the time, but in football, when you make a decision, 50% of the people already don't like the call. Because if the play works, you're really smart, and if the play doesn't work, you're not really smart. And I don't ever remember calling a play that I didn't think was going to work, but sometimes they don't, okay? And then, of course, by Monday, there's 75% of the people who don't think you have any idea what you're doing. But I found that. And again, and the SEALs talk about, okay, when things are going bad, what do? Relax, look around, make the call. So you relax, first of all, to get yourself above the weeds. Number 2, examine all the data that you have. And at that point, you're going to have to make a decision. Now, that doesn't mean you ride her till she burns, so to speak. If the decision's bad, you've got to be able to say, I made a mistake, let's change direction. But you can't be afraid of making the decision. And one of the things that I try to utilize here is, Harry Truman always had a saying, he'd always ask the question, when do I have to make the decision by? When's my drop dead date? Because he knew a lot of decisions really resolved themselves before he'd have to make one. And so what he tried to do is avoid the decisions he really didn't have to make and focus on the ones that he really had to make going forward so that he'd keep his mind clear for the big picture.
Which is great advice for anybody in any kind of leadership position. A lot of times that thing that you see out there that looks so ominous just disappears.
No question. And you know what? I've always tried to utilize, everybody has a different paradigm by which they view the problem. And by looking at the problem from all different facets, especially people who think way differently than you. I love to be surrounded by all different kinds of people because they can give you the different perspective and possibly find that little piece of information that you need to solve the problem before you have to make that big decision.
Which is, one of those other big points that we talked about, bringing people into the process. People support what they help create. And if you're looking to build a shared vision, you want to get people involved because they're going to support that decision. They help make it. They had input into it.
Oh, you're exactly right. And I think, it does 2 things. One, there's always unintended consequences when you make decisions. And so my preparation in football, if the starting quarterback goes down, you have to have game plan B. Or if your starting kicker can't kick, you've got to have game plan C. And so we always over-prepared for those situations so that it looked very smooth regardless of what happened. And the other part is, when things are going bad, everyone's looking at you for what you're going to do. And if you've already planned out the sequence of things you're going to do, if you happen not to be there, the people underneath you know how you're going to react and can make decisions until you have a chance to give it the attention it deserves.
Which is so critical moving forward with things, because you're not always available to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And it's also part of building up that cadre of leaders who can step up when they're needed.
There's two kinds of leaders, I think. There's egocentric, which means everything has to revolve around the leader, and the leader makes every decision, and nothing can happen without the leader. Or there's a principle-centered leader where all the actions are made by values and principles of what you have. And I try to be that latter part, that when I'm making decisions, it's data-based, not emotional, and that I make sure that others around me know exactly what the intent is. So again, if I'm not there, they can do that. Plus, you want the organization to function when you're not there. And if one person thinks they have all the answers, I don't like the future look for those kind of organizations.
No, and with that, one of the ways our firm does strategic planning is by bringing in what we call the stakeholder input and attunement process. So you've got your core planning team, mm-hmm. and they're working through, but every step of the way, they're going out to key stakeholders. In some organizations, it's been the entire organization, all 100 people who come in and get their input. And it really helps with something called the Johari window, because your top managers are not going to know everything that's going on in the front lines.
Absolutely. And that's exactly to Simon Sinek's book. He talks about all the people at the front line have all the knowledge and no power. And all the leaders have all the power and no knowledge. And until the leaders want to relinquish some of their power to those on the front line, the organization can't be the best it can be. And I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but absolutely correct to what you're saying.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things that people talk about empowering their team. That's what empowerment truly means, is relinquishing the power, allowing them to make decisions. I mean, the Navy, with all its leadership training, is really good about that. It is the battlefield commander who makes the final decision on what's going on. And mm-hmm. every issue that we've had with the military, from Vietnam to Afghanistan now, it becomes the politicians trying to run it from the back office, and it just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And that brings up another point in leadership. You can't lead from behind your desk. I always lead by walking around. You can't understand what's going on the front lines if you're always in your ivory tower, so to speak. So I make it a point at least twice a week just to walk around campus, say hello, learn people's names. I mean, how powerful that is just to learn their names and understand some of the things that are going on in their life. The old saying that people won't care until they know how much you care. Well, it's absolutely true, because people want to feel valued. There was a book written by Abishoff, who took the worst ship in the Navy to the best, the Benefold. And he surveyed, he was losing sailors at a rate of about 50%, and that to train Navy people is about $45,000 to $50,000 a year. So he did a survey. What's the most important things? Why are you leaving? And he found that salary was fifth on the list. Being valued, being listened to, being part of the bigger picture, and being able to have part of something bigger than themselves was so much more valuable than the salary. And so if you remember that as the way you treat people, your organization can thrive even though it doesn't have the most highly resourced organization that you have.
Yep. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That was what I was trying to remember, but you're much better at it than me. But it's cliche. I know it's corny and all that. And I am the corniest president in America, but it's absolutely true. And I try to make sure you don't forget that. And the hard part is, as a president, you have so many things coming at you all the time. I mean, the enormity of the job. People got mad at Trump, whether you were supporting him or not. He sat down, he goes, wow, I didn't realize the enormity of the job. I don't think anyone can realize that. And what happens is people come in and they just want 5 minutes of your time. Hey, I just need 5 minutes. Well, that always turns into 25 minutes. So what I tell people here is I'm always approachable, but I'm not always accessible. And so don't think that because I can't meet with you, it's not I don't care. It's just I don't have the time right now to put into that. And that's why it's so important that you have the other people on your leadership team up to speed so that maybe they can help with that problem, so that person could continue to go forward in a positive way without having to get on your plate. Because as a leader, you've got to get above the weeds all the time, and you can't get pulled down into them. And for me, that's really hard. Because as a football coach, I got close to every one of my players and taking that time with them. And here I've had to learn that to delegate a lot more and let others use their talents. And the key is the number one thing I can do is create an atmosphere to allow the talents to come to the surface and then get the heck out of the way.
Yep. Absolutely. That is probably one of the best things that anybody can do. You build your team, let them do what they can do best.
And I'm lucky here. I've marveled at not only our team of the leadership, but even faculty. I've had an opportunity to sit on faculty retreats where they're actually designing the liberal arts curriculum for freshmen through seniors. And the intellect and the talent in the room and the thought process of how we take this freshman and then instill the habits and values that they need to be successful for the rest of their life was eye-opening. We're all guilty of looking at the other side of campus and saying, well, they don't work as hard as I do. Well, here's what I'm learning. A lot of people work very hard to make this experience for our students to be great. And I probably didn't give enough credit to other facets of the university because I was so immersed in my 80-hour-a-week job as a football coach.
I understand. So how do we build better leaders for higher ed?
Well, first of all, you have to empower them, as you say, but the number one thing, here's the number one factor in any organization being successful is the attitude of the leader. The attitude leader is the number one thing. So you've got to go in with an open mind, and you've got to believe in the process yourself. You got to believe where you're going first, because if you don't believe, people are going to see right through you. So that means you have to educate yourself as to exactly where you want the organization to go. You may not have that answer right away as you're learning what's going on. We're making a strategic plan here for the next 18 months while I'm getting my feet on the ground to see where we need to go the next 8 to 10 years, if that makes sense. And there's some immediate things that I think we can do better and that are crucial that we do better to give us a shot for that. So the first thing is, dude, you've got to trust people until they prove you wrong, rather than not trusting them until they prove you right. I take the opposite approach because I think people will rise to the level of expectation that you have for them. And if you expect people to be good, I think they will work their tail off to make you right, if that makes sense. And then don't be afraid to step in. One of the Princeton alums that I met who ran the whole bond business for Citibank, I asked him, what do you look for when you hire people? He said, well, the first thing I do is I take my time in the hiring process. But if I find a guy who's a jerk, I fire that person as fast as I can to get him out. But here's what I look for when I look to hire people and when I look to recruit kids. Number one, character. Character is number one, integrity, all those things, because that's what they're going to do when you're not looking. Will they do the things they have to get to be as good as they can be? Number two is work ethic. Obviously, every job requires a lot of work ethic. You got to put the time in. It takes what it takes. Number three, the ability to check your ego at the door. It's not about you, it's about the team now. That's number one. Number four, for me, was the ability to be coached hard. In football, we played a violent, passionate, physical, emotional game, and to tell people I didn't raise my voice, that would be a lie. But I never called it yelling. I always called it coaching with volume, if that makes sense. But what we told kids, everyone talks about being a family. Well, to me, family is, and my wife gets mad when I use this, and I'm not advocating corporal punishment, but we love them and we spank them with the same intensity. And that means you've got to be able to hold them accountable. The people that you correct can't melt or can't go into the jar, so to speak, if they're being corrected. You have to be able to correct it. So they've got to be able to want to be corrected. They got to be able to want to get better. And the fifth thing I looked for was talent. And talent to me was the ability to play the position I tell you to play, which goes back to that ego thing. And so I always looked, and I actually implemented this when I got here. Listen, we're always going to look at curriculum vitas and publication and teaching and all that when we hire faculty. But don't forget about the intangibles. The character is important. The work ethic is important. Can you be part of a team? Can you be corrected? Because all those things, you can overcome a lot of talent. Remember, hard work and perseverance trump talent every time.
Yep, always do. Mm-hmm. And so, Roger, this has been fascinating. I rarely get a chance to talk leadership with somebody who is a very good leader. So thank you for that. We're coming to the end of our time. Mm-hmm. 3 takeaways for your fellow presidents and boards with respect to leadership.
Well, first of all, we said leadership is leadership. And I've been contacted by numerous coaches since I've been in this position, thanking me for giving them, maybe blazing a trail for their opportunity to get into different kinds of leadership as their career gets older. Because most people wouldn't take the chance that my alma mater did on a football coach that had no academic administrative experience. So leadership's leadership. And as a good friend of mine, Oak McCullough, said, I could lead a tank pavilion or I could lead a food bank. It doesn't matter. The same qualities go in. Number two, I said a little bit earlier, You got to lower expectations because you may come into a situation where everyone thinks you're the savior. Well, you may very well be the savior, but remember, you can't do everything all at once, and you've got to prioritize, and you're always going to have a lot to learn. If you have not been leading organizations, and that's thrust upon you at the magnitude that it is at a college university, you've got to buy yourself some time to learn what's going on. So as I said earlier, you're always approachable, but you're not always accessible. And be willing to say no. That's the hard part. Get a great executive assistant that kind of shield you and make sure she can manage your time. And I would also say I always try to get 3 things accomplished each day. If I pick the top 3 things, if you get 3 in a day, that's a really good day. Because of all the things that come up, don't overload yourself or have the expectations you're going to do everything at once. And then the last one I would say is, and speaking to the board, because as a coach and as a president, you have to speak with a lot of different constituencies. Learn the language of that constituency. You can't talk to the faculty the same way you talk to the board, the same way you talk to students, the same way you talk to your administrative team. Make sure you understand the language with which you're speaking because that's going to help your communication. And the key is the faculty, the leadership team, and the board are all there for the same thing, to create the best student experience they can. They all have different roles within that in the governance structure. So it's crucial that you're able to bring people who think very differently, people in the business world to the people in higher academic, together. And to do that, if you understand the language of each constituency group, it's going to help you better communicate your vision for the organization.
That is a great takeaway. Thank you very much. So Tell me, what is next for you? What's next for Doane?
Well, for me, we're trying to grow enrollment. We made the decision to go from college to university about 4 years ago. And right now, our organizational structure is kind of caught between those. And I think while I do believe we are a university, we're offering PhDs and EEDs and masters. What that organization looks like for a school our size, we don't know yet. And don't be afraid to get out of the model. Well, your university, you have to have a provost. Well, maybe you don't. I think you look at your organization and find the model that works best for you, if that makes sense. That's what we're going to be doing here at Doane. The headwinds that are going to be facing small private colleges are going to be substantial because after the Great Depression, people stopped having babies. And so at 25, just the sheer number of college-age students in this country is going to drop dramatically. And the competition for those students is going to be enhanced. There's going to be many small colleges go out of business because there's just not going to be the clients or the customers for you to have. And so being able to form that strategy so you can thrive in that situation is crucial. And I think the other thing that we're trying to do here at Doane is the experience of Doane for our students should be from recruitment through retirement. The students that graduate now are going to change jobs 15 to 20 times and change career 3 times. And what I want to do is get our alumni organization. No university can be great without an active and very involved alumni association. But that doesn't just mean writing checks. It means providing opportunities for our graduates. Doane needs to take care of Doane. And so getting our alumni activated and then creating a database, creating an information center so that any graduate, regardless if they're 5 years out or 20 years out, will turn to Doane for that answer to where can I go to get connections, where can I go for my next step. So again, we're building that family around not just who's in the organization, but those who have gone beyond to go be successful in the rest of the world.
That is a great vision, and I wish you all the best with it. Roger, thank you for being on the program. It's been a wonderful conversation. I look forward to more of these with you.
I'd love that. Thank you very much. And like I said, I'm going to plagiarize some of the stuff I got here, so just understand that.
Likewise, my friend, likewise.
Good.
Thank you, and take care. Thanks for listening, and a special thank you to today's special guest, Dr. Roger Hughes, president of Doane University, and for his sharing his thoughts on leadership in higher education and how it takes a leader to get anything done. Our next guest is Dr. Melik Khoury, president of Unity College. Dr. Khoury is one of the true innovators in higher education, and he'll be joining us to talk about how Unity has more than doubled their enrollment in the past year through excellent market research and transforming the higher education business model. And this is while most institutions have lost students. This is going to be a great podcast. I hope you'll join me for it.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.